The Galactic Council chamber was huge. It floated in space around a neutral planet called Axios Prime. Inside, hundreds of aliens from different worlds were arguing. They had been arguing for 300 years. The problem was simple. Two alien races wanted the same territory. The Velcrin were big insect-like creatures with hard shells and sharp claws. They said the land belonged to them because their ancestors had lived there long ago. The Tharsos were different. They looked like blobs of jelly that could change colors. They said the land was theirs because they lived there now. Ambassador Xiphon clicked his mouth parts in frustration. He was from a race called the Kixari. He had been trying to help these two groups agree for many cycles. A cycle was what the aliens called their years. But nothing worked. Every idea was rejected. Every compromise was refused. The Velcrin leader was named Kresh. He was a war leader, which meant he was a soldier. He hissed and clicked angrily whenever someone suggested he should give up the land. The Tharsos leader was called Morvan. He was a consensus speaker, which meant he spoke for many Tharsos who were connected together. When he got angry, his body turned deep red. High Arbiter Selenis stood up. She was the leader of the council. She was beautiful and strange. Her body was made of crystal that reflected light in rainbow colors. Her race was called the Etherians, and they lived for thousands of years. "We need new ideas," Selenis said. Her voice sounded like music. "We need someone who thinks differently. Someone who does not have our old ways of thinking." The chamber became quiet. Everyone knew who she meant. There was only one race new enough to think differently. The humans? Kresh's voice came through a translation box. He could not believe it. Those newcomers who just learned to travel between stars? Yes, the humans, Selenis said. They stopped their own wars. They united their whole planet in just one generation. They understand how to make peace in ways we have forgotten. Many aliens were upset by this idea. It seemed crazy. Humans had only been traveling in space for 43 cycles. That was nothing. Some aliens had been in space for thousands of cycles. How could these babies help them? But the council was desperate. After much argument, they voted. They would ask the humans to come and help. Captain Danny Cole was drinking coffee on his spaceship when the message arrived. His ship was called Horizon's Edge. It was exploring new parts of space. When he read the message, he almost choked. The Galactic Council wanted humans to help solve one of the biggest problems in the galaxy. Danny sent the message to Earth right away. The leaders on Earth could not believe it either. But they knew this was important. This was a chance to show the galaxy what humans could do. They picked people carefully for this mission. They needed diplomats who were good at talking and making deals. They needed military advisors who understood strategy. They needed scientists who could explain complicated things. They needed cultural experts who understood different ways of thinking. The leader they chose was Ambassador Helen Price. She was in her 50s with gray hair and smart eyes. She had helped stop wars on Earth. She had made enemies become friends. She was calm and patient, but also firm when she needed to be. Her second in command was Commander Jake Murphy. He was a military officer, a soldier who had seen combat. But he was not just a fighter. He was smart and tactical. He knew when to fight and when to talk. He was good at staying calm when things got dangerous. They also brought Lieutenant Amy Carson. She was young but brilliant. She studied alien psychology, which meant she tried to understand how aliens thought and felt. She had read everything humans knew about the different alien races. The team prepared for weeks. They studied the problem between the Velcrin and Tharsos. They learned about galactic politics. They practiced different ways of talking and negotiating. Finally, they were ready. The human delegation left Earth on a ship called the Olive Branch. The name was important. On Earth, an olive branch meant peace. It was an old symbol from ancient times, but the olive branch did not travel alone. 6 military ships went with it. These were frigates, smaller warships that could protect the diplomatic ship if something went wrong. This was normal for humans. Whenever important people traveled, they brought protection. The humans did not know that this would be a problem. They did not know that other aliens did not do this. They were just following their normal procedures. The journey took 2 weeks. They traveled through jump gates, special points in space where ships could move very fast between star systems. During the trip, Ambassador Price held meetings every day. The team studied more about the Velcrin and Tharsos. "Remember," Price told her team, "we are neutral. We are not taking sides. We are here to help them find a solution they can both accept. Lieutenant Carson nodded. She had been studying both races carefully. The Velcrin value strength and directness, she explained. They respect people who are honest and clear. The Tharsos are different. They value patience and consensus. They like to think carefully and make decisions together. So we need to bridge those two approaches, Murphy said. Be direct enough for the Velcrin, but patient enough for the Tharsos. Exactly, Price agreed. When they finally reached Axios Prime, the view was amazing. The Council station was enormous. It had huge spheres connected by tubes and towers. Thousands of ships were flying around it in organized patterns. Each ship looked different because each race built ships in their own way. Captain Cole opened a communication channel. Axios Prime Control, this is the human delegation. We request permission to dock. The reply came quickly, but something was strange about the voice. It sounded nervous. Human delegation, you are cleared for diplomatic berth 7. Please proceed directly. As the human ships moved toward the station, something odd happened. Other ships started moving away from them. A big Velcrin warship that was docking suddenly undocked and moved several kilometers away. Are they avoiding us? Cole asked his first officer, Lieutenant Greg Foster. Looks like it, sir, Foster replied. He checked his instruments. I am reading increased power from nearby ships. They are activating their shields. On the olive branch, Ambassador Price frowned. Did we do something wrong? Before anyone could answer, a new transmission came. It was High Arbiter Selenis. She appeared on their screen. She looked less bright than in the recordings they had studied. Ambassador Price, welcome, Selenis said carefully. We are pleased you arrived. But I must ask about the military ships with you. Is this normal for human diplomats? Price glanced at Murphy, who looked confused. Yes, High Arbiter. This is standard security. 6 frigates for protection. Is there a problem? There was a long pause. I see, no problem. It is just that most species send diplomats alone, or with one ceremonial guard ship. But please, continue to dock. The Council is waiting. After the transmission ended, Murphy pulled up displays showing the space around them. Ambassador, I count 40 warships nearby. They belong to different Council members. But none of them are near their diplomatic delegations. Carson looked over his shoulder. Her eyes went wide. Oh no. I think I understand. For most species, diplomacy and military force are completely separate. They do not mix them. The fact that we brought armed ships to a peace conference is sending the wrong message. What message? Price asked, though she was starting to understand. That we are not just mediators, Carson said quietly. That we are a threat. That we are the kind of species who brings weapons to peace talks. Price closed her eyes for a moment. They had not even arrived yet, and already they were scaring people. This was going to be more complicated than she thought, but there was no turning back now. The human delegation was here. The galaxy was watching, and somehow they had to prove that humans understood peace just as well as they understood war. The ships moved slowly toward their assigned docking berth. Around them, the alien vessels kept their distance, watching carefully, and on hundreds of worlds across the galaxy, beings watched the news feeds and wondered about these strange newcomers who had arrived at a peace conference with guns. The Council chamber was even more impressive from the inside. It was designed to hold hundreds of delegates at once. Each species had their own section with the right air, temperature, and gravity for their needs. The humans sat in the center ring where they could see and speak to everyone easily. When Ambassador Price entered, she saw how crowded the chamber was. This was supposed to be a simple mediation session between two species. But it looked like half the Council had found reasons to attend. The observation galleries were packed. Everyone wanted to see the humans in action. To the left sat the Velcrin delegation. War leader Kresh led them. His entire team was made up of soldiers. Their hard shells were covered in scars from old battles. Their antennae twitched with irritation. They did not want to be here. To the right sat the Tharsos. Consensus speaker Morven pulsed in deep blue colors. His collective had brought philosophers and historians. These were beings who thought about things for a very long time. They measured time in centuries, not years. High Arbiter Selenis called the meeting to order. Her voice carried through the chamber's sound system. We gather today to resolve the territorial dispute over the Helion expanse. The Velcrin claim ancestral right. The Tharsos claim current occupation. For 300 cycles, we have found no solution. Ambassador Price, humanity has been invited to offer new perspective. Please begin. Price stood up. Several nearby aliens flinched at her sudden movement. She made a mental note to move more slowly next time. She took a breath and began to speak. Thank you, High Arbiter. Before I begin, I want to say something. My species is new to galactic affairs. We do not have all the answers. We might be wrong about things, but sometimes being new helps. Sometimes those who are closest to a problem cannot see solutions that are obvious to outsiders. She turned to face both delegations directly. War Leader Kresh, Consensus Speaker Morvin, I have spent 2 weeks studying your dispute. I have read all the documents. I have watched all the debates, and I have noticed something interesting. You are not actually fighting over the same things. Confused murmurs spread through the chamber. Kresh's translator crackled with an angry tone. Human, we have been very clear. The Helion Expanse is Velcrin territory. It has always been ours. They must leave. And that territory is our home now. Morvin pulsed in response. His colors shifted to show emotion. We have lived there for 8 generations. To force us out would destroy us, Price nodded slowly. Yes, I understand what you have said. But War Leader, let me ask you a question. When you say the Helion Expanse is yours by ancient right, what exactly do you mean? What does that territory mean to your people? Kresh seemed surprised by the question. His antennae went stiff. It is where our warrior clans proved themselves. Where we became the Velcrin hegemony. The sacred battlegrounds where our ancestors earned their honor. So it is about history and honor, Price said. Then she turned to Morvan. And Consensus Speaker, when you say it is your home, what does that mean for the Tharsos? Morvan's colors shifted through several shades before settling on thoughtful purple. It is where we grew, where our consciousness expanded from small groups into our current unified form. The planet's minerals are essential to our reproductive cycle. So it is about biology and survival, Price said. She looked between them. War Leader, do you need to physically live on the Helion Expanse? Would it be enough if your people could visit the historical sites, maintain them, honor your ancestors there? Kresh was silent for a long moment. Yes, that would satisfy our honor, but they would never allow it. And Consensus Speaker, do you need the entire planet? Or specifically the mineral-rich regions where you reproduce? The breeding grounds cover only 30% of the surface, Morvan admitted. The rest is largely empty. Price smiled. Several aliens in the front row leaned back at the sight of her teeth. Then you are not actually fighting over the same territory at all. You could share it. The chamber erupted in noise. Delegates from dozens of species started talking at once. Lights flashed. Sounds blared. Chemical signals filled the air. The concept seemed to shock everyone. Commander Murphy leaned close to Lieutenant Carson. Did we just solve a 300-year-old problem in 10 minutes? Carson whispered back. Maybe, but look at their reactions. I think we just asked questions that no one else thought to ask. High Arbiter Selenus called for order. Gradually, the chamber became quiet again. Ambassador Price, are you suggesting a partition? Not exactly, Price said. I am suggesting cooperation. The Velcrin maintain their sacred sites. Maybe they station guards there to protect them. The Tharsos continue to live in the regions they need for biological survival. Both peoples acknowledge that the other has a legitimate connection to the world. You create a shared government for the rest of the territory. That would never work, Kresh said flatly. Our species are too different. And that was when Price said something that would echo through galactic politics for years. She looked directly at the War Leader. Her eyes were steady and calm. With respect, War Leader, that is what every human nation said before we formed our world government. Different languages, different cultures, different religions, thousands of years of warfare. We were too different to cooperate. Until we realized that being different was not the problem. Fighting over those differences was the problem. She turned to address the entire chamber. Humans have been fighting wars for our entire history. We built weapons that could destroy our own planet. We did terrible things to each other. Things we are ashamed to remember. But we learned something from all that suffering. Peace is not the absence of differences. It is the choice to value cooperation more than conflict. The silence that followed was deep and profound. Lieutenant Carson felt tears in her eyes. She knew the history behind those words, the wars, the genocides, the nuclear standoffs. Humanity had come so close to destroying itself so many times. It was Morvan who spoke first. His colors shifted to a shade that meant respect mixed with wonder. You say your species built weapons that could destroy your own world, yet you chose not to use them? We came very close, Price admitted. Closer than I like to think about. But yes, we chose differently in the end. We chose to survive together rather than die separately. Kresh's antennae trembled. And this is why you brought warships to a peace conference. Not as a threat. As a reminder. Price looked confused. War leader, we brought those ships as standard security. I do not understand what you mean, but Carson did. She spoke up for the first time. War leader Kresh, I think I understand. You see our military escort as a demonstration that we are a species who understands war well enough to bring it anywhere, but we choose to pursue peace instead. Is that right? Kresh's translator carried a note of grim approval. Exactly. A species that knows only peace has no credibility when talking about war, but a species that knows war and still chooses peace has true wisdom. The misunderstanding had somehow become a breakthrough. The humans had not meant to send that message. But it resonated with species who had spent thousands of years in various states of conflict. Over the next 6 hours, the negotiation continued. The humans asked questions. They listened carefully. They helped the Velkrin and Tharsos see each other not as enemies, but as peoples with different needs that could actually work together. Price facilitated while Murphy and Carson provided support. They worked as a team, each bringing their own skills. Price was diplomatic and patient. Murphy was practical and direct. Carson understood the psychological and cultural dimensions. Slowly, carefully, the framework for an agreement took shape. The Velkrin would maintain their sacred sites and station honor guards there. The Tharsos would control the breeding grounds essential to their survival. The remaining 70% of the planet would be governed jointly by a council with equal representation from both species. It was not perfect. There were still details to work out. But the fundamental breakthrough had happened. For the first time in 300 years, both sides could see a path forward. As the session concluded, something remarkable happened. Delegates from other species approached the human team. They had their own disputes, their own conflicts. They wanted to know if humans could help them too. Ambassador Price found herself suddenly in demand. Everyone wanted to talk to her. Everyone wanted human mediation for their problems. But it was High Arbiter Selenis who pulled Price aside as the chamber emptied. Her crystalline form dimmed slightly. She looked tired. Ambassador Price, I must confess something, Selenis said quietly. When we invited humanity to this mediation, I hoped you might provide useful ideas. I never imagined you would actually succeed. No one did. Price smiled, genuinely pleased. I am glad we could help. You do not understand, Selenis said. Her voice was serious. The galaxy has been watching today. Every major species had observers here. They saw what I saw. A species barely 40 cycles into space travel, solving a problem that stumped us for 300 cycles. They saw your efficiency, your directness, your way of cutting through complications to find simple truths. And that is bad? Price asked. Her smile faded. Ambassador, most species spend thousands of cycles learning galactic politics. You arrived and changed everything in an afternoon. The news spread through the galaxy faster than light. The human delegation had solved the Velkrin-Tharsos dispute. A problem that had lasted 300 years was resolved in one afternoon. Within days, everyone was talking about the humans. Ambassador Helen Price sat in her quarters reviewing requests. 43 different species wanted human help with their disputes. The Galactic Council had asked humanity to establish a permanent diplomatic presence on Axios Prime. Earth's government was thrilled but also overwhelmed. But not everyone was happy about this. A group of older alien species formed a coalition. They called themselves the Traditionalist Accord. They filed a formal complaint with the Council. They said humanity's rapid advancement was destabilizing the careful balance of power in the galaxy. The complaint was ironic since these species had been fighting each other for centuries. But it was still concerning. Commander Jake Murphy knocked on Price's door. He entered when she called. His face looked worried. Ambassador, we have a situation. There is a delegation of Corvin lords requesting an immediate meeting. They are waiting outside. They refused to schedule properly, Price sighed. She rubbed her tired eyes. The Corvins. They are the ones leading the Traditionalist Accord, correct? Yes, ma'am. They are one of the oldest spacefaring species. Very proud, very set in their ways. And they brought a battle fleet. That got her attention. A battle fleet? How many ships? 37 warships. including 3 dreadnoughts. They are holding position outside the defense zone, but it is still a show of force. The station is nervous. Price stood up and straightened her clothes. Then we should not keep them waiting. Get the team together. And Murphy, make sure our escort is ready, just in case. But keep it quiet. We do not want to make this worse. 20 minutes later, Price entered the diplomatic meeting room. The Corvin delegation was waiting. They were impressive beings, tall and broad with bony head crests. Their skin was covered in scales that shimmered with colors. Lord Commander Vrath stood at the center. He was clearly the leader. His body language radiated aggression and anger. Ambassador Price, Vrath rumbled. His voice sounded like rocks grinding together. We have traveled far to meet these humans who think they are wise enough to reshape galactic order. Price kept her expression calm and friendly, despite his hostile tone. Lord Commander Vrath, I am honored by your visit. But I should clarify something. We do not think we are wise. We simply offered to help when asked. Help, Vrath sneered. You solved in hours what the Council claimed was impossible. You did this deliberately to show you are superior. No, Price said firmly. We did it because species were suffering. We thought we could help end that suffering. Is there something wrong with that? Vrath took a step forward. His guards moved with him in perfect sync. It was meant to be intimidating. To the humans who had grown up watching military parades, it just looked like normal military bearing. They were not impressed. There is everything wrong with it, Vrath snarled. The Velkrin and Tharsos were weak. They deserved to suffer for their weakness. By interfering, you robbed them of the chance to prove themselves through strength. You corrupted the natural order. Lieutenant Amy Carson stood beside Murphy. She suddenly understood. She leaned over to whisper quickly to Price. Ambassador, the Corvins believe in social Darwinism. They think suffering and conflict make species stronger. Peace to them is weakness and stagnation. Price nodded slightly. Then she addressed Vrath directly. Lord Commander, I understand your philosophy. Strength through adversity, growth through challenge. It is not completely alien to human thinking. We have similar concepts. Vrath's crest rose slightly. He was surprised. You do? Of course. We have sayings like that. We say things get stronger under pressure. We say challenges help us grow. We understand that difficulty can lead to improvement. She paused. But we also learned something important. There is a difference between productive challenge and pointless suffering, between growing stronger and simply causing pain. Weakness, Vrath spat. Your species is soft. You have been corrupted by comfort. And then Commander Murphy did something unexpected. He laughed. Not a polite chuckle. A genuine loud laugh that echoed through the room. Everyone turned to look at him. Price looked momentarily alarmed, but Murphy kept talking. I am sorry, Lord Commander, but that is the funniest thing I have heard all week. He stepped forward. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes were sharp. You think humans are soft? Lord Commander, we evolved on a death world. Do you know what Earth is like? He was getting into it now. Price decided to let him continue. Sometimes the military perspective worked better than diplomacy. Earth has weather that can kill in minutes, Murphy continued. We have predators that hunted our ancestors for millions of years. We have diseases that wiped out entire civilizations. We invented medicine because our own tiny organisms were trying to kill us. Murphy walked slowly as he talked. Our planet tried to kill us with ice ages, with volcanic eruptions, with earthquakes and tsunamis and hurricanes. We survived all of it. And when we ran out of natural disasters to face, you know what we did? We created our own challenges. We climbed the highest mountains just because they were there. We dove to the deepest parts of the ocean to see what was down there. We shot ourselves into space on controlled explosions before we even knew if we would survive. Vrath was listening now. His aggressive posture had changed. He seemed less certain. And yes, Murphy said, his tone becoming more serious. We fought each other. Thousands of years of warfare. We invented weapons that could kill millions with a single strike. We brought ourselves to the edge of extinction. Not once. Multiple times he locked eyes with the Corvin Lord Commander. So when you talk about strength through adversity, about growth through challenge, about proving yourself through conflict, humans understand that in our bones. We lived it. We survived it. And then we made a choice that apparently scares you. We chose to direct all that strength, all that drive, all that competitive spirit toward building instead of destroying, toward cooperation instead of domination. The room was silent. Vrath stared at Murphy. Something shifted in the Corvin's expression. You chose peace not from weakness, Vrath said slowly, but from strength, because you were strong enough to choose it. Exactly, Price said softly. The weak embrace peace because they have no choice. The strong embrace peace because they choose to. Which do you think is more impressive? Vrath was quiet for a long moment. His head crest rose and lowered in what their translation software said was deep thought. Finally, he spoke again. His tone was different now.
Less hostile.
More thoughtful. The Corvin Empire has existed for 50,000 cycles. We have conquered 100 worlds. We have proven our strength countless times. He paused. But we have never been at peace. Not truly. There is always another enemy, another threat, another challenge. It is exhausting, yes, Price said gently. It must be. You are saying there is strength in rest? In cooperation? In choosing not to fight? We are saying there is wisdom in knowing when to fight and when not to, Murphy said. Fighting every battle makes you a warmonger. Avoiding every battle makes you a coward. Choosing carefully which battles matter, that takes real strength. Vrath looked at his own guards, then back at the humans. We came here to challenge you, to expose you as frauds or weaklings, but I see now that would have been unwise. Actually, Price said with a careful smile, challenging us would have been fine. We are not afraid of being challenged. We just prefer that challenges be productive rather than destructive. Lord Commander, if you want to test human strength, we would be happy to arrange exchanges, athletic competitions, academic debates, joint scientific projects. Humans love competition. We just prefer when everyone survives it. Something remarkable happened then. Vrath's crest fluttered in what the software translated as amusement. He made a sound that might have been laughter. Ambassador Price, Commander Murphy, you have given me much to think about. The Corvin Empire will withdraw our complaint to the Council. Thank you, Lord Commander, Price said. And if you are interested, we would be happy to continue this conversation. Perhaps some of your warriors could train with our military, share techniques and philosophies. Vrath's eyes gleamed with interest. Yes, that would be acceptable. Our fleet will remain in orbit for another cycle. We should speak more. After the Corvin delegation left, Price slumped into a chair. She was suddenly exhausted. Murphy, that was either brilliant or completely insane. Probably both, Murphy admitted. But it worked. They respect strength, so I showed them we understand strength. Then you showed them we understand wisdom. Together, we gave them what they needed to hear. Carson was reviewing her notes. She looked thoughtful. Ambassador, Commander, I think we just discovered something important. We keep accidentally impressing these species, not because we are trying to, but because we are being authentically human. Maybe that is the key. Stop trying to fit into their frameworks. Just be ourselves. Be ourselves, Price repeated. The species that brings military escorts to peace conferences. That makes direct eye contact. That shows teeth when happy. That asks obvious questions. That solves 300-year-old disputes in an afternoon. The human delegation walked off their ship and into the station's receiving bay. The bay was enormous, built to hold creatures of all sizes. Some aliens were tiny, no bigger than a house cat. Others were huge, tall as buildings. The bay had different sections with different air and gravity for different species. Ambassador Helen Price led the way. Commander Jake Murphy walked beside her. Behind them came 6 Marines in dress uniforms. The Marines wore their best ceremonial clothes and carried staffs instead of weapons. This was proper protocol for a diplomatic meeting. To the humans, this looked respectful and professional. The Marines stood straight with perfect posture. They moved together in sync, each step matching. This was how human soldiers were trained. But to the aliens watching, it looked like something else. It looked like a military unit preparing for battle. The perfect coordination scared them. Most species could not move together like that unless they shared one mind. High Arbiter Selenis came forward to greet them. She had 20 Etherian warriors with her. This was very unusual. The records showed that such large honor guards were only for the most important visitors. Several other council members were there too. Many more than normally greeted new delegations. Ambassador Price, Selenis said. She bowed her head the way humans did. The aliens had learned this gesture from Earth's cultural files. On behalf of the Galactic Council, I welcome humanity to Axios Prime. Price smiled warmly and stepped forward. She reached out and took Selenis's hand, shaking it in greeting. This was normal for humans. People shook hands all the time on Earth. It was automatic, like breathing. But Selenis's hand trembled slightly. For most alien species, touching a stranger was dangerous. It could spread disease or poison. It could be an attack. The fact that Price did it so casually with no fear was shocking. Behind Selenis, Ambassador Xiphon leaned toward his assistant, a younger Kikshari named Threx. They spoke in their own clicking language. "Did you see the soldiers?" Xiphon whispered. "They move in perfect sync. That kind of coordination usually needs a hive mind." Threx's antennae shook nervously, and their leader. She touched the High Arbiter with no hesitation. Either humans have no sense of danger, or their ambassador is incredibly brave. The group began walking through the station. Price chatted pleasantly with Selenis, asking questions about the station and the council. To Price, she was just being polite and friendly. She had no idea how unusual her behavior seemed. The corridors were full of aliens. There were so many different types. Some were tall and crystalline. Some were small and furry. Some floated in the air. Some crawled on many legs. Every shape and size imaginable. As the humans walked past, something strange happened. The normal activity in the corridors stopped. Aliens turned to look. Then they moved away. Some stepped into doorways. Others found different corridors to take. One group of small traders actually pressed themselves against the wall, their eye stalks following the humans with obvious fear. Lieutenant Carson noticed this. She leaned close to Murphy and whispered, "They are afraid of us." Murphy whispered back, "That is ridiculous. We are the shortest species I have seen. That thing over there has claws bigger than my arm." "It is not about size," Carson explained quietly. "Look at how we move. We all move together at the same pace, same rhythm. We make eye contact with them when we pass. We show our teeth when we smile. To many of these species, that probably looks aggressive." Murphy glanced at Price, who was still talking happily with Selenis. She had no idea that her friendly smile was frightening people. "Should we tell her?" "Let us wait and see," Carson suggested. "Maybe when they get to know us, they will relax." But she did not sound sure. And when they reached their assigned quarters, her doubts grew stronger. The humans had been given an entire section to themselves. The nearest other delegation was 3 corridors away. It was presented as a gesture of respect, giving them space and privacy. But Carson suspected the real reason was to keep the scary newcomers at a safe distance. That evening, the delegation gathered in their common area. They needed to discuss the day and prepare for tomorrow's negotiation session. Captain Cole joined them through a video link from the Olive Branch. His face on the screen looked worried. "Ambassador, I have been monitoring communications. The station's defense systems have been activated. They are running combat readiness drills, and our escort ships are being tracked by at least a dozen targeting systems." Price rubbed her temples. She felt a headache coming. "They think we are a threat. They invited us here to help make peace, but they are treating us like an invasion force." Murphy leaned back in his chair. "Can we blame them? Think about it from their view. We are an unknown species that united our whole planet in living memory. That takes most species thousands of years if they can do it at all. We show up with military escorts to a peace conference. Our body language is all wrong. We probably look like the most efficient war machine they have ever seen. But we are not," Price said firmly. "We are here to help," Carson spoke up. "Then we need to show them that. Starting tomorrow in the negotiations, we need to demonstrate that humans understand peace as well as we understand conflict. How do we do that?" Price asked. "By being ourselves," Carson said. "By showing them what human diplomacy really looks like. By listening, by asking questions, by finding solutions. We just need to be authentic." Price nodded slowly. "All right. Tomorrow we show them who we really are." But that night, as she lay in her bed trying to sleep, Price could not stop thinking about the aliens pressing themselves against the walls, about the ships moving away in space, about the defense systems powering up. She had spent her whole career making peace, bringing people together. The idea that she frightened people just by existing was deeply troubling. In the morning, the delegation prepared carefully for the negotiation session. They chose their clothes with care. They practiced walking more casually, less like a military unit. They reminded themselves to be warm and open. "Remember," Price told her team, "we are here to help 2 species who have been suffering for 300 years. That is what matters. Not whether we look scary. We focus on ending their pain and finding a solution." Murphy nodded. "And if they are still scared of us after we solve their problem, well, at least their problem will be solved." Carson smiled. "That is very human of you, Commander. Focus on the practical outcome. Is that a bad thing? Murphy asked. No, Carson said. I think that might be exactly what the galaxy needs. People who care more about solving problems than about looking good. As they left their quarters and headed toward the council chamber, they passed more aliens in the corridors. And yes, the aliens still moved away. They still watched nervously. But this time the humans smiled anyway. They nodded in greeting. They acted friendly and calm, even though they knew it probably looked frightening. Because that was who humans were. They did not hide who they were to make others comfortable. They were genuine and honest and direct. And if that scared people at first, well, maybe those people would learn that there was nothing to actually fear. The council chamber was ahead. Inside, two species waited who had been enemies for 3 centuries. They had tried everything to solve their problem. Every traditional approach had failed. Now they were desperate enough to try something new. To try the human way. Price took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. Her team fell in beside her, and yes, they walked in sync. Yes, they moved like a coordinated unit, because that was how humans walked when they worked together. It was natural for them. The chamber doors opened and the humans walked in. Every eye in the massive room turned to look at them. Hundreds of aliens, maybe thousands, all watching. The galleries were full. This was clearly a major event. But Price did not let it intimidate her. She had faced down warlords and dictators on Earth. She had negotiated in war zones and disaster areas. She had seen humanity at its worst and helped bring out its best. A room full of curious aliens was not going to shake her. She walked to the center of the chamber where the mediator's position waited. Her team took their places around her, and then she looked up at High Arbiter Selenus and smiled. It was time to show the galaxy what humans could do. 6 weeks after the successful mediation, the Velcrin and Tharsos signed their historic agreement. The ceremony took place in the main council chamber. Delegates from across the galaxy attended. It was a major event. When war leader Kresh and consensus speaker Morvan stood together to sign the document, Ambassador Helen Price stood between them as witness. It was a powerful symbol, the human who had helped them find peace. High Arbiter Selenus spoke to the assembled delegates. Her crystalline form was brilliant in the chamber's light. Today marks not just the end of a conflict. It is perhaps the beginning of a new era for our civilization. Humanity has shown us that our old assumptions about diplomacy and conflict resolution were incomplete. They reminded us that sometimes the most powerful solutions are also the simplest. Listen, understand, find common ground. The applause was enthusiastic. The humans tried not to look too pleased with themselves. But as they left the ceremony, Price overheard a conversation between 2 delegates that made her pause. Did you see how they walked? In perfect formation again. And the way they all stood when the Arbiter spoke, all at the same time. It is unnerving, but effective. Everything about them is effective. That is what worries me, Price sighed. They had done everything right. They had achieved what they hoped to achieve. But still, the galaxy was slightly afraid of them. She pulled Murphy and Carson aside. We need to talk about how aliens see us, she said. We have been here for 6 weeks. We have had remarkable success. But we are also scaring people without meaning to. We need to figure out how to be ourselves while also being less intimidating. Maybe we should stop moving in formation, Carson suggested. Walk more casually. We could smile less, Murphy offered. Since apparently our teeth frighten people, Price shook her head. No. If we start changing ourselves to make others comfortable, we lose the authenticity that is working for us. We need to help them understand us better, not pretend to be something we are not. So what do you suggest? Murphy asked. Cultural exchange, Price said. Real, meaningful exchange. Invite them to Earth, let them see our cities, meet our people, experience human culture firsthand. Let them see that yes, we can be efficient and coordinated and direct. But we are also messy and chaotic and diverse. Let them see the full picture. Over the next few months, that is exactly what happened. Earth began hosting delegations from across the galaxy. The exchanges were carefully managed to show humanity in all its complexity. Aliens visited Earth cities and wilderness areas. They attended human schools and sporting events. They experienced human art and music and literature. They saw humans argue passionately and then laugh together moments later. They saw humans help strangers without expecting anything in return. They saw the messy, beautiful, complicated reality of human civilization. And slowly the fear began to change, not into complete understanding, that would take generations, but into a growing appreciation for the species that had arrived on the galactic stage and immediately started asking uncomfortable questions and proposing impossible solutions and somehow making them work. 3 months after the successful mediation, Price received a communication from High Arbiter Silenus. The Arbiter appeared on screen with a smile. She had learned that expression from humans. Ambassador, I wanted to inform you that the Council has voted unanimously on something important. We are creating a new position called Galactic Mediator. It is a rotating position, held for one cycle at a time by different species. We would like humanity to be the first to hold this honor. Price felt a wave of emotion, pride and humility and responsibility all mixed together. High Arbiter, we would be honored. But I hope you understand something. We do not have all the answers. We are going to make mistakes. Of course you will, Silenus said warmly. But the galaxy has been making the same mistakes for thousands of years. At least your mistakes will be new ones, and we might actually learn from them. Besides, I think the most important thing you have taught us is this. Admitting you do not have all the answers is the first step toward finding them. As the transmission ended, Price looked out at space. At the countless stars representing countless worlds, all those beings trying to figure out how to live together. Humanity had stumbled into this role, had accidentally impressed and frightened the galaxy simply by being themselves. Now they had to live up to the expectations they had created. She thought about Earth, about its long history of conflict and cooperation, about the hard lessons humanity had learned through thousands of years of mistakes and triumphs. They were not perfect, far from it. But maybe that was okay. Maybe the galaxy did not need perfection. Maybe it just needed someone willing to try something different, to ask the obvious questions, to believe that peace was possible even when it seemed impossible. Back on Earth, the news of humanity's appointment as first galactic mediator was met with celebration and worry. Commentators debated what it meant for humanity's future. Politicians argued about resources. Citizens wondered if they were ready. But in a small apartment in New York City, a young girl named Sophie watched the news with her father. She was 7 years old. She had simple questions about the complicated universe. "Dad, why are the aliens scared of us?" she asked. Her father was named Carl Bennett. He had been a soldier and was now a teacher. He thought carefully about his answer. "They are not really scared, sweetheart. They just do not understand us yet. We are different from them in some ways, but we are nice, right? We want to be friends? Yes, we do, and we are showing them that. Sometimes when you are new somewhere, people do not understand you at first, but if you keep being yourself, keep being kind and honest, eventually they figure out who you really are." Sophie nodded. That made sense to her. She turned back to watch Ambassador Price giving an interview from Axios Prime. On the screen, Price was talking about humanity's hopes for the future, about building bridges between species, about the exciting possibilities of working together. Watching that broadcast, millions of humans across Earth felt the same thing. A mixture of pride and responsibility, excitement and worry. They were stepping into a larger universe, one that found them both fascinating and frightening. But they were doing it the way humans always did things. By being authentically, messily, beautifully human, the galaxy would adjust. Humanity would adjust. Together they would figure out what it meant to build a truly peaceful, cooperative, diverse galactic civilization. It would not be easy. There would be setbacks and misunderstandings. There would be challenges no one had anticipated. But for the first time in thousands of years, the Galactic Council was looking forward instead of just maintaining things as they were. And it was all because a group of humans had shown up to a peace conference with military escorts, had asked some obvious questions, had accidentally scared everyone by being surprisingly good at making peace. Ambassador Price often said in her reports to Earth something simple but true. "We are not perfect, but we are making progress." And in the end, that might be the most human thing of all. As time passed, more species began to understand humans better. They learned that the military precision came from discipline and training, not aggression. They learned that direct eye contact was respect, not threat. They learned that showing teeth in a smile was friendliness, not warning. They learned that humans brought guards to important events because they cared about protecting their people, not because they wanted to intimidate others. Most importantly, they learned that humans had experienced terrible wars and chosen peace anyway. that humans had built weapons of mass destruction and chosen not to use them, that humans had every reason to be cynical and bitter about the universe, but instead chose to be hopeful and helpful. The human delegation remained on Axios Prime for another year. They mediated 17 more disputes during that time. Not all were successful, but most were. They trained other species in human-style mediation techniques. They shared Earth's history, both the good parts and the bad parts, so others could learn from humanity's mistakes. And gradually, the perception shifted. Humans were no longer the scary newcomers. They were the helpful problem solvers. The ones who asked uncomfortable questions that needed to be asked. The ones who believed that most conflicts could be resolved if people just talked honestly and looked for common ground. When Price finally returned to Earth, she was greeted as a hero. But she did not feel like one. She felt like someone who had just done her job. She had helped people who were suffering. She had used the skills and knowledge that humanity had gained through its painful history. She had been herself, and somehow that had been enough. At the welcome ceremony, reporters asked her what she had learned during her time with the Galactic Council. She thought for a moment before answering. I learned that every species has its own strengths and weaknesses. Every culture has something valuable to offer. But I also learned that some things are universal. The desire for peace, the hope for a better future, the willingness to work together when given the chance. These things cross all boundaries of biology and culture. And what do you hope for humanity's future in the galaxy? Another reporter asked. Price smiled. I hope we continue to be ourselves, to be honest and direct, to care about others.